Hello everyone, I'm Diane, and today I'll be continuing a discussion on sex and gender. I'm going to focus more on how things are defined and how those definitions work in reality. Simply speaking, sex deals with biology while gender deals with what goes on your head based on cultural norms. In this video, I'll be focusing on gender. If you didn't see the first video, the link is in the description, or click the icon in the upper right corner. When people say there are only two genders, they are overlooking not only biology, but also how people actually experience the world. While a lot of people may fall into two categories, not everyone does, and that needs to be recognized if we want to have proper discourse about the human condition. Remember, there are exceptions to every rule, including this one. How would you define gender? Well, I'm certain if you ask 10 different people, you'll get 10 different answers. Hopefully, if you saw my first video, you know that sex doesn't fit neatly into a binary, so it makes sense that gender doesn't either. Initially, gender is assigned based on what genitals you are born with, which determines what pronouns are used. So, in a binary system, if you are male, you are a man, and you are referred to with the he/his pronouns. If you are female, you are a woman, and you are referred to with the she/her pronouns. If you are okay with this, you are considered to have the gender cisgender, since cis means on the same side, so everything matches. If you are not okay with some aspect of this, then, well, there's a whole spectrum of beautiful genders for you to pick from. But still, what does it mean to be a man, and what does it mean to be a woman? I'll admit that gender is actually a difficult topic for me to understand since there are no nice, neat rules that govern it. There are a lot of places people try to say gender arises from, so let's take a look at why each of those reasons falls apart. The easiest to start with is that gender arises from biological sex. But, let's face it, biological sex is not a nice, neat binary system. So, from that alone, there are more than two genders. Plus, we don't assign gender to someone on the street based on their primary sex characteristics. We go off the secondary sex characteristics like the shape of the body and the ability to grow facial hair. But, just as there are situations that can blur the line between male and female genitals, there are situations that blur the line between male and female secondary sex characteristics. So, how do you refer to someone who does not neatly fit into a binary? Honestly, that seems to all depend on your language. As a native English speaker, I do not speak with grammatical gender since there is only one form of the. But I only have two genders in the form of pronouns to pick from when referring to people, and they are tied to the biological sex, which is inferred from secondary sex characteristics. This may be why so many native English speakers say there are only two genders. Plus, they may not know about the rise of the use of the singular they as a third option. In other languages, grammatical genders exist, but are more linked to the morphology or phonology of words instead of their definition. For example, in German, die Männlichkeit means the masculinity, but the word die is considered the feminine form of the. German and many other languages also have a third or neutral gender for their words. Finnish only has gender-neutral pronouns and lacks grammatical gender. Since language influences how you think and interact with the world, it makes sense that it also influences how you perceive gender. So, to me, when someone says there are only two genders, it also sounds like because the words don't currently exist in English, it doesn't exist, which isn't true. Another big player in defining gender seems to be the embodiment of masculinity and femininity, with men representing masculine things and women representing feminine things. But that just moves the goalpost. Now what do feminine and masculine mean? Well, what culture do you live in? Because that influences definitions a lot. In Western culture, masculine traits are things like strength, courage, and assertiveness, while feminine traits are things like gentleness, empathy, and sensitivity. But a man can be sensitive and a woman can be assertive, and that's fine. You can have any blend of feminine and masculine traits you want, and that's great. After all, I've seen women that can bench press my house, and a man who can barely lift a jug of milk, and there's nothing wrong with either. But if men can be any amount of feminine or masculine, and so can women, is there really any difference between the two genders? Since a gender can be any blend of masculine and feminine, then aren't there an infinite amount of genders instead? This is my single biggest problem with picking a gender: unclear definitions or definitions that are relative to culture. To address this, people are starting to approach gender as a spectrum rather than a binary. Some people have a clear idea what it means to be a man or a woman in their head and live life to the fullest embodying that. For others, these ideas create expectations that are damaging and limiting. For people like me, I see the use for gender linguistically, but outside that, I don't get it. If I can't properly define a label, I don't like using it. So, I decided that I'll use non-binary if someone asks what my gender is, since I feel masculine or feminine at various points throughout the day. I'm fine with the she, her pronouns, since for me, that has a strong link to what genitals I have. I'm also fine and sometimes like the they, them pronouns. I also recognize that's not how it works on other people, and I'm fine respecting whatever gender and pronouns they feel comfortable with. Judith Butler has a good quote that goes, "Gender is the copy to which there is no original." Now that we have an idea of how complicated gender is, I have the opinion that there should be at a minimum 4 genders: man, woman, non-binary, not a man or a woman, and agender, no gender. Man, woman, and agender probably have the strictest definitions, and non-binary has an absolutely enormous umbrella of terms for everyone else. In this video, I'm not going to attempt to go over all the various genders out there. I'll just say that if you feel like you don't fit into your culture's definitions, don't worry, you're not alone. Ash Hardell has a good series called The ABCs of LGBT over on her channel that covers a ton of genders and definitions. She also has guests come on that share their experiences dealing with different gender identities. If you are curious about what is out there, it might be a good place to start. Gender Spectrum is also a good resource if you prefer to read, and can be found at genderspectrum.org. So to recap, gender is a complicated thing to define that varies greatly depending on what culture you are raised in. If your gender matches your pronouns and your biological sex, then you are cisgender. If you are not cisgender, there is a whole spectrum of identities for you to explore. Just as there are more than 2 sexes, there are more than 2 genders. Gender is an extremely complicated topic to discuss, and what I covered is just the tip of the iceberg. However, I think everyone realizing that there are more than 2 genders is a good step in the right direction for discussing the human condition. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. To find part 1, click the icon in the upper right or the link in the description. I'd like to take the time to shout out my Patreon supporters. I can't properly express how much your support means to me. The names and icons you see on screen are the people who pledged $10 and up. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Diane Discusses. For parrot pictures, I'm Diane Discusses on Instagram. If you have a topic you'd like me to discuss, feel free to message me or leave a comment below. Until next time, I'm Diane, and I hope you have fulfilling discussions.